Florida has a dirty little secret, and it's not the humidity. It's that the state most people retire to has dozens of towns, real towns, with Victorian history and waterfront views and homes under $200,000 that almost nobody talks about. Not because they're hard to find, because nobody made the video. This list isn't Sarasota, it isn't Naples. It isn't any place with a Whole Foods and a traffic jam shaped like a snowbird migration. These are the towns that got left off the algorithm, the ones where the median age is already north of 50, and the locals prefer it that way. 12 towns, real prices, real trade-offs. And one rule before we get into it: if you've only ever visited Florida in December, you haven't visited Florida. More on that later. Here are 12 quiet, affordable Florida towns to retire in, only if you hate crowds. Fernandina Beach. Start at the top of the state, literally. Fernandina Beach sits on Amelia Island in Nassau County, pressed against the northernmost edge of Florida's Atlantic coastline. Population around 13,000, median age of 48. Owner-occupied housing rate of nearly 80%. That last number matters. In a state where vacation rentals and investor-owned properties have hollowed out neighborhood stability in city after city, a town where 4 out of 5 homes are owned by the people living in them is saying something about itself. Here's what you're paying for. The only municipality in the United States to have flown 8 different national flags. French, Spanish, British, Spanish again. The Patriots of Amelia Island, the Green Cross of Florida, the Confederacy, and finally the Stars and Stripes. The town's Victorian downtown is still physically intact, including the Palace Saloon, which has been operating continuously in the same location since 1903 and holds the documented title of Florida's oldest continuously operating drinking establishment. That's not a TripAdvisor distinction. That's a 120-year-old brick building that's been serving drinks through every hurricane, every recession, and every flag change the county ever saw. The median listing price runs around $714,000, with actual closed sales landing closer to $542,000. That's well above the statewide median, more than double it. In fact, this is not the affordability anchor of the list. It's the premium option, the one you choose when you want stability, walkability, and the kind of historic character that took a century to build. The trade-off, tourism, creates seasonal congestion downtown. The elevation averages just over 12 feet, and the annual rainfall of 53 inches combined with Atlantic storm exposure makes flood risk real variable, not a theoretical one. Fernandina Beach sets the ceiling. The rest of the list goes lower. Crystal River. 50 miles north of Tampa on the Gulf Coast, Crystal River exists for one reason above everything else: Kings Bay. Kings Bay is a freshwater spring system that stays at 72 degrees year-round, which makes it the preferred winter refuge for the West Indian manatee. And Crystal River is the only place in the United States where swimming with wild manatees is federally permitted. That's not a marketing line. It's a legal designation under 3 overlapping federal statutes: the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Endangered Species Act, and the Florida Manatee Sanctuary Act. The activity is strictly regulated. Passive observation only. No fins. Fins stir up the sediment and irritate the manatee's sensory hairs, called vibrissae. No chasing. No touching. No separating mothers from calves. Federal fines reach $50,000. People have gone to prison over it. This is relevant to the retirement conversation because the same regulatory framework that governs how you swim extends to how you own property. Waterfront homeowners in Crystal River operate under strict limitations on dock construction, seawall work, and watercraft speed. From mid-November through the end of March, certain spring vents are designated complete no-entry zones. You're not just buying a house on the water, you're buying into a federally managed ecosystem. Inland homes start in the $250,000 to $350,000 range. Waterfront properties jump to $400,000 to $800,000. The town is small, the commercial infrastructure is modest, and the Gulf Coast geography brings its own storm surge exposure. But for a certain kind of retiree, someone who'd rather snorkel with a manatee than sit in a resort pool, the lifestyle proposition is real. DeFuniak Springs. Walton County has 2 economies, and they don't talk to each other. On the coast, along Highway 30A, median real estate prices run from $650,000 to well over $1.5 million. 20 miles inland, in the rolling hills of the Panhandle, DeFuniak Springs offers single-family homes in the $200,000 to $300,000 range and large rural acreage that simply doesn't exist anywhere near the beach. The town is built around Lake DeFuniak, a spring-fed body of water that is, and this is a documented geological fact, not a Chamber of Commerce boast, one of only 2 naturally perfect circular lakes on Earth. Both are in Florida. The lake is ringed by one of the state's best-preserved collections of Victorian-era homes, a legacy of the late 19th century when DeFuniak Springs served as the winter home of the Chautauqua Assembly, a traveling educational and cultural institution that brought lectures, music, and arts programming to the region during an era when that kind of access was genuinely rare in rural America. The isolation that preserved all of this is also the primary cost of living here. There's no specialty healthcare locally. Serious medical needs send residents to Pensacola or Fort Walton Beach. The winters are meaningfully colder than the rest of Florida, with regular overnight freezes that require actual heating and genuine winter preparation. That's not a complaint for everyone. For retirees coming from the Midwest or the Northeast who didn't move to Florida to pretend winter doesn't exist, it's a feature. What DeFuniak Springs offers is quiet, affordability, and a town that looks exactly like it did 100 years ago because nothing came along to replace it. Palatka. Palatka is the most affordable real estate market on this list, and the numbers are stark enough to be worth sitting with for a moment. Median listing price, $297,500. Actual closed sales, between $159,500 and $210,000. Price per square foot between $147 and $190. Median monthly rent, $1,025, less than half the statewide average. That rent figure dropped nearly 38% year over year. In a state where renters have been squeezed for years, Palatka is moving in the opposite direction. The city sits on the St. Johns River in Putnam County, and it spent much of the 19th century as a major steamboat port and gateway to the Florida interior. The historic downtown is preserved, and the annual Florida Azalea Festival draws visitors to Ravine Garden State Park every spring, a formal garden of stone terraces and botanical trails built by Works Progress Administration workers in the 1930s. Here's what the price reflects. The local median household income is $33,000, and the job market is genuinely limited. The riverine environment drives significant mosquito and termite pressure. High-end retail, medical specialists, and most dining options require a drive to Gainesville, St. Augustine, or Jacksonville. Palatka isn't a hidden gem waiting to be discovered. It's an affordable town with real trade-offs that its price accurately communicates. For retirees who are fully funded, have transportation, and don't need a local economy to participate in, it's a legitimate option. For anyone who hasn't stress-tested those assumptions, the price is doing a lot of communication that's worth listening to. Apalachicola. Florida Forgotten Coast earned that name honestly. Apalachicola sits in Franklin County, far from any major metro, with an economy historically built on commercial oyster harvesting and marine trades. The brick warehouses along the waterfront are original. The Victorian residential streets behind them are intact. This is what coastal Florida looked like before condominiums. Right now, buyers have real leverage in this market. The median listing price is $435,000. But homes are selling for nearly 10% below asking on average, with properties sitting on the market for 99 days. In a market where sellers routinely expected full price offers 2 years ago, that's a meaningful shift. Apalachicola is also where the storm surge conversation becomes unavoidable. Hurricane Helene pushed a 5.18-foot surge through the town in the fall of 2024, flooding the waterfront and low-lying roads. That's not the catastrophic 15-foot surge that hit the Big Bend region further north, but it's a data point, not an anomaly, and anyone evaluating property here needs to run the flood insurance numbers before they fall in love with a cottage. The town is remote, medical services are limited locally, grocery options are thin. These are real constraints, not scenic quirks. For retirees who want genuine isolation, genuine history, and a waterfront lifestyle at a price that coastal Florida stopped offering a decade ago. While understanding those constraints clearly, Apalachicola makes a case. Arcadia. Move inland to DeSoto County and the price floor drops again. Arcadia has a median property value of $174,100. Median monthly housing costs run $836. The year-over-year appreciation rate hit 14.9%, which means this market isn't static, it's being noticed. The town's identity is agricultural and unapologetic about it. Arcadia hosts the historic All-Florida Championship Rodeo, and its downtown functions as one of the state's premier antique districts. A concentration of dealers and shops that draws collectors from across the region. There's no tourism infrastructure here in the resort sense. The local economy is tied to cattle, citrus, and the service industries that support them. The homeownership rate sits between 67 and 72%. Mobile homes make up 32% of the housing stock. That's a real characteristic of the local real estate landscape, not a footnote. The poverty rate of 24.1% is nearly double the national average. The local job market is agricultural. High-tier medical services, specialty dining, and retail require travel. Arcadia's inland position does protect it from coastal storm surge, which matters when you look at what happened to some of the towns lower on this list, but it sits in the path of inland hurricane wind tracks and heavy rainfall events. For retirees who genuinely want to be left alone in a rural interior town with low carrying costs and no pretense of amenity, tourism Arcadia delivers. The price says the same thing. High Springs. High Springs is the outlier in this lineup. The median household income is $94,421. The homeownership rate is 84.3%. Nearly 40% of residents hold a bachelor's degree or higher. This is not a town that accidentally ended up on an affordability list. It's a town that educated, financially stable people chose deliberately. And the demographics show the result. The draw is the Springs. Poe Springs, Gilchrist Blue Springs, and the broader network of North Central Florida freshwater systems make High Springs a hub for cave diving, spring snorkeling, canoeing, and kayaking. These aren't commercial tourist operations. They're natural geological features that happen to be accessible from a quiet inland town. With a functioning historic district, the median owner-occupied home value is $320,700, which is higher than several coastal entries on this list. The window of affordable discovery may already be narrowing. High Springs is what happens when a quiet place quietly acquires a reputation. The practical limits. High-tier retail and dining aren't local. Gainesville is 20 miles away. Inland climate means occasional winter freezes and spring subterranean termite swarms. Neither is catastrophic. Both require awareness. High Springs is, by most measures, the easiest retirement on this list. The trade-off is that it costs more than the towns around it, and it costs more precisely because the people who found it first were willing to pay. Sebring. In 1912, an Ohio industrialist named George Sebring founded a city in the Florida interior and laid it out based on the ancient Egyptian city of Heliopolis. The streets don't run in a grid, they radiate outward from a central circle. Circle drives, like spokes on a wheel. It's not a metaphor or a marketing angle. It's the actual street map. You can look it up on satellite view. Decades later, an engineer named Alec Ullman looked at the abandoned concrete runways of a World War II Army Air Force training base and turned them into a racetrack. The Sebring International Raceway has hosted the 12 Hours of Sebring Endurance Race continuously since the 1950s, drawing tens of thousands of international visitors every year. Neither of those facts is why retirees are moving here. They move here because the median property value is $187,900, the homeownership rate is 78.6%, and the largest share of homeowners pay between $800 and $1,499 in annual property taxes. The Sebring micropolitan area has a population of around 105,700. The median age is 54.4, and single-family homes regularly trade between $150,000 and $250,000. The trade-offs are geographical. The nearest saltwater beach is over 60 miles away. Summer heat in the interior hits hard without a coastal breeze, and the humidity-driven pest pressure is real. Termite activity, mosquitoes, and the general biological intensity of a Florida interior summer are all facts of life here. But Sebring is geographically insulated from storm surge in a way that almost nothing on the Gulf or Atlantic coast can claim. That distinction becomes increasingly relevant as the list continues downward. Wewahitchka. name alone filters out most of the population, which is kind of the point. Wewahitchka, Wewa to locals, sits in Gulf County, about 60 miles south of Interstate 10. Population under 2,000. No interstate access. Nearest major medical facility is 30 plus miles away in Panama City. The median housing cost is $751 per month. The median gross rent is $825. This is one of the most financially accessible towns in Florida, and it has almost nothing in common with what most people picture when they think of retiring to the state. Here's what it does have. The world's authentic Tupelo honey. The Apalachicola and Chipola river basins surrounding Wewa contain the largest concentration of Ogeechee Tupelo trees on Earth. During the brief spring blooming window, local beekeepers float their hives on flatboats deep into the river swamps, past the reach of pesticides, past the range of other flowering plants, to let the bees harvest nectar from the swamp blossoms in isolation. The resulting honey doesn't crystallize. That property comes from the specific fructose to glucose ratio of the Ogeechee Tupelo blossom. It can't be replicated anywhere else because the trees don't grow anywhere else in the same concentration. Wewahitchka doesn't produce a version of Tupelo honey. It produces the only Tupelo honey. The poverty rate is 20%. The median income for residents over 65 is $30,761. The wetlands surrounding the town drive intense mosquito pressure and seasonal flooding. The isolation is total. For retirees who are fully self-sufficient, have reliable transportation, require no local job market, and want to live in a place that almost no one else will ever move to, Wewa offers a genuinely singular environment. The Tupelo honey is, in a literal sense, why this specific geography exists. Punta Gorda. In August of 2004, Category 4 Hurricane Charlie made direct landfall at Punta Gorda. It damaged or destroyed approximately 80% of the city's structures. What happened next is the story worth telling. Rather than losing population or stagnating, the city rebuilt. Under the strict post-Charlie Florida building codes, the reconstruction used impact glass windows, reinforced concrete structural designs, and elevated seawalls. The historic downtown and waterfront districts were rebuilt at modern structural standards while preserving their scale and character. Punta Gorda's built environment today is, in most respects, more hurricane resistant than cities that never faced the forcing function of a direct strike. The current real estate reflects that. The median sale price for a single-family home citywide runs between $344,000 and $360,000, meaningfully below nearby Sarasota at $449,945 and well below Naples at $770,000. 28% of Charlotte County's population is 65 or older. Cash buyers account for 39% of single-family transactions, driven by retirees liquidating out-of-state assets, a liquidity signal about the type of buyer this market attracts. The financial carrying costs, though, are real. Homeowners insurance and flood insurance premiums for canal front properties in Punta Gorda Isles are among the highest in the region. Seawall maintenance is an ongoing expense that doesn't appear in the listing price. The resilience story is genuine. The cost of that resilience is also genuine, and it shows up in the monthly budget. Cedar Key. 3 hurricanes in 13 months. Category 3 Hurricane Idalia, August 2023. Category 1 Hurricane Debby, August 2024. Category 4 Hurricane Helene, September 2024. Storm surge between 10.84 and 12 feet, destroying approximately 25% of the island's homes. Cedar Key is a small barrier island in Levy County at the end of State Road. 24. Permanent population of 700 to 800 people. An economy built on commercial clam aquaculture after gillnet fishing restrictions in the 1990s shifted the industry. No high-rise condominiums, no chain retail. The Cedar Key Historical Society Museum documents the island's arc from logging hub to oyster town, clam farming operation. The real estate market tells you exactly what those hurricanes communicated to sellers. Active listings are up. Median days on market sit between 107 and 109 days. Homes are selling at about 5.3% below asking. People are leaving, and the buyers moving in are getting favorable terms. By 2040, projections indicate that nearly half of the island's critical infrastructure will be regularly affected by high tides and moderate storm events. Local leaders are already designing plans to relocate civic infrastructure to higher ground. That's not speculation, that's municipal planning documentation. The nearest supermarket is over 50 miles away in Chiefland. Flood insurance is extremely difficult to obtain here at any price that makes the carrying costs workable. Cedar Key is old Florida at its most pure and its most exposed. The listing price is not the real price. Anyone who doesn't understand that difference before making an offer is making the most expensive mistake on this list. Steinhatchee. The fishing village at the mouth of the Steinhatchee River, sitting at the border of Taylor and Dixie counties, has a permanent population between 550 and 756 people, depending on the season. The housing stock is stilt homes, historic cottages, and mobile homes. The local culture is built around crabbing, offshore charter fishing, and the summer scalloping season that draws seasonal visitors from across North Florida. It holds the top spot for one reason. In September of 2024, Hurricane Helene pushed storm tides of up to 15 feet through Taylor County. 363 major structures were damaged. 74% of them were destroyed, not damaged. Destroyed. Nearby communities including Keaton Beach, Deacle Beach, and Dark Island experienced near total loss. Active listings in Steinhatchee have increased by 35.17% in the aftermath. Homes are selling at nearly 8% below asking price. The negotiating leverage is extraordinary. The reason for that leverage is on the record. Rebuilding under current codes requires elevating structures on pilings above the new base flood elevation, which has been revised upward after Helene's data. Construction costs, flood insurance, and windstorm coverage have all risen. The financial barrier to rebuilding or buying here is not small. Steinhatchee ranks first not because it's the best retirement option. It clearly isn't for most people. It ranks first because it is the most complete test of everything this list is actually about. It is genuinely remote, genuinely affordable on the purchase price, genuinely connected to a Florida that predates tourism infrastructure, and genuinely, measurably dangerous for anyone who doesn't walk in with a full understanding of the insurance landscape and the storm history. The surging listings and seller concessions are not market inefficiency. They are sellers communicating information directly, through price, to anyone willing to read it. A few things worth stating plainly before you start making any real estate calls. Visit in August, not December. December is 75 degrees and postcard skies and no bugs. August is the low 90s, 74% average coastal humidity, and afternoon rain that falls every day for 4 months straight. The state gets 60% of its annual precipitation between June and September. Mosquito populations can double within a week of standing water accumulating. High humidity accelerates termite activity and wood decay in ways that don't reveal themselves on a winter visit. If you make a relocation decision based on a December trip, you made it based on a version of Florida that exists for roughly 5 months of the year. On the insurance question, for any coastal or barrier island town on this list, get the wind, flood, and hazard insurance quotes before you start touring homes. The listing price is the floor. The annual carrying cost is the real number. In Cedar Key and Steinhatchee particularly, the gap between those two figures is large enough to change the entire financial logic of ownership. One more thing, Florida's property tax structure is in active flux. A proposed amendment targeting the 2026 legislative cycle would expand the non-school homestead exemption dramatically, but anyone establishing Florida residency after December 31st of 2026 enters a 5-year phase-in period before qualifying for the full expanded benefits. For anyone watching this in 2026 and seriously considering a move, that timeline is not abstract. It's a financial variable with a calendar date attached to it. These 12 towns got overlooked because they didn't fit the retirement brochure. They don't have the beaches the algorithm recommends or the amenity infrastructure that makes a town easy to film. What they have is actual history, actual affordability, and an honest set of trade-offs that reward people who do the work before they sign anything. The towns were always there. Now you know where to look.